And we were talking about how, like, even if you look at the movies that have been put out of, like, dystopia movies of, like, Divergent or Hunger Games, or they paint that wall as, like, I don't know, a higher being trying to say, like, this is what's good for you, but really, you know, you'll do better on the other side. And that's the whole point of whether books or movies in today's society. Do you think, like, that's coincidence that, like, it gives you that mindset that, like, kind of rules were meant to be broken and I know what's best for me?
Yeah. So this is really insightful, I think, actually, because almost all of Satan's ploys have quite a bit of truth built into them, right? And so there is some truth in that God wants me to grow up and to live as a being in his world. But what Satan then does is pushes that super, super far. Perelandra, the Satan figure in Perelandra, tries to convince the green lady, who is Eve on Venus, okay? But he tries to convince her, God really wants you to disobey because that's how you become fully autonomous. That's what the Satan figure tries to convince her to do, and that's Satan's ploy, right? God, if you really want to be everything God wants you to be, then you need to disobey him. And in fact, he wants you to disobey him, right? And there's that implicit narrative running in the undercurrent of all of our movies and TV shows and all that type of stuff, this idea that for you to be truly autonomous, and again, a phrase that some will be familiar with, expressive individualism, in order for you to be a truly expressive individual, you need to look inside of yourself, find who you are, and then don't let anyone tell you that anything about that is wrong. Express it out in the world, right? There's some truth to that, but the problem is it doesn't take into account the fact that I'm a fallen human being, right? That I'm not perfectly and purely good. That would actually work perfectly if I weren't fallen. If we were in the heavenly state where I was unable to sin, right, then that would work perfectly, right? God wants me to perfectly express myself. The problem is we're a both and. I'm a human being created in the image of God, and God wants me to creatively express that in the world, but I'm also a fallen sinner who has wicked and evil inclinations and a bad heart that needs regenerating. And if you just say, yes, expressive individualism, yes, transcend all of the laws, the rules, and the boundaries, yes, go out there and be the biggest person you can be, unfortunately, because of who you are as a human being, some good may come out of that, but some profound evil might come out of that as well. In fact, will come out of that, right? Because the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things, who can know it? So I think you're 100% right, and look out for these. We're going to talk about this more when we do our conference, but look out for these subtleties where elements of Christian truths are then wed to half-truths or subtle falsehoods and then really, really pushed, because that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of Satan's number one strategies. He takes something that's pretty much true, and in Perelandra, you have a figure who's trying to stop the green lady from falling, and he actually at one point, he says, it was so hard to converse with the Satan figure because everything he said was almost nearly true, right? And it's just those small subtleties. He changes or tweaks a few things, and it's really hard for people to see the lie because there is so much truth into it. So, yeah, we got to be careful about it. I'll just give another example. The Matrix movies. You guys know I love The Matrix. I've quoted The Matrix many times. Yes, tons of messianic themes in The Matrix, right? Neo is the one, right? He resurrects from the dead. It couldn't be more clear in many ways. But the Matrix films, as an underlying motif, they're revolutionary films. If you get to the end of The Matrix, it's essentially throw off all boundaries, throw off everything else, throw off all the guises. I no longer live in a world full of rules in which you're confining me. And then Neo flies into the universe, breaking all of the rules of gravity, showing that he's no longer bounded by the rules of the Matrix itself, right? So let's tell the Christ story and then insert the seed of revolutionary, go beyond all of those boundaries, break out of the system, right? And then all of a sudden you have a very subversive plot that resonates a lot with human beings because there are so many Christ themes in there, but there's some subtleties in there that are not Christian, right? Christians aren't revolutionaries in that sense, right? Jesus tells us to, the way revolution comes about from a Christian mindset is through self-sacrifice and love, right? Not through throwing off the chains of our, Creator. So, yeah, it's very important to see that, and more as Christians, we're going to have to be discerning when it comes to media in trying to understand there are truths in a lot of these things, but there are a lot of falsehoods as well. So, does that answer your question? Yeah, it's a really good question.